I felt like because I asked it specific things about Eastern stuff, communism, stuff like this, and and maybe I'm biased, but I felt like I got very Western feedback. Do you know at all if the people are at OpenAI are all over the world, or are they just Western English-speaking people? Because I know it does speak different languages, but do you know the people down there?
Yeah, good question. So it's interesting. OpenAI is based in San Francisco or the Bay Area more generally, and so I think most people who program these things are indeed California-based people. So with all the associated political leanings, maybe, I don't know, but no.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back today with a guest I'm really excited to talk with. We got Gautam Kamath. He is assistant professor down there at the University of Waterloo, but you also spent time, got your PhD and master's at MIT, and spent some time undergraduate at Cornell. Wow.
Yep. I've been around, I guess, the Northeast U.S., spent a lot of time in the general area, yeah.
Cool. So you are a certified academic, and computer science is your game. So we're going to be talking a little bit about AI today, which is what? Very topical. Everybody's talking about it.
Of course.
So let's start off. I just want to talk about ChatGPT. How long has this been going on, and what do you think of it so far?
So I guess ChatGPT, the exact timeline is crazy because things in AI and ML come out like so quickly. But I think it's been like, 4 months since it came out? Do you remember?
The third iteration, probably, or September, something like this.
Yeah, within the last 6 months for sure. But I think it's super, super impressive. The fact that it is able to have such a natural conversations and seemingly able to, recover a lot of information that is embedded somewhere in its model. I just think it's a very cool model. It's not completely unprecedented in the sense that we've seen a lot of lead up in the last few years, things like, GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3, BERT, Roberta, all of these models have been impressive in increasing levels. And so it's kind of natural that something like this came out. I think there are some things that are notably better about it. It seems like, for example, a common thing people have been asking is, okay, write me a rap song in the style of this person. And it just very naturally can just do that without any issue, which I think is really cool. So I think it's very, very impressive in terms of the stuff it can do. I think there's some drawbacks and problems with it, which seem to be common to many of the previous works as well. So it's good, and it still has some issues.
What are some of the major drawbacks that you see? Because I took it for a test drive, and I also saw some things where I thought, well, this is questionable. What did you see?
Exactly. I think some of the things are, a lot of my personal research is on robustness and stuff like that. And I think, I guess related to that kind of is just trying to understand, like these things can spit out a lot of incorrect data, which I think is problematic in many use cases. For example, one I saw the most recent thing where there was the Bing version of ChatGPT, which just came out like a week or two ago, where someone was asking, okay, what are the Avatar show times? Because Avatar 2 came out recently. And they're saying, and the model replied, it's coming out in the future in December 2022. And he was arguing with it. No, it's 2023. And then the model started getting very annoyed with him unusually. And basically refusing to continue the conversation until the user apologized for trying to lie that it's 2023. Just stuff like that. Also, in my personal use, I was trying to do a little bit of literature search to find out where some ideas originated from in terms of which paper should I cite. So I was looking through a bunch of websites, and I eventually found it, but just thought, maybe I'll speed this up a little bit by asking ChatGPT, can it tell me where these ideas came from? And it confidently told me, these ideas come from this paper and this paper by those two authors. So I looked it up. These papers didn't exist at all, or maybe one of them did exist, but it was just a totally different work that was unrelated to what I was searching for. I think that's kind of one of the bigger problems here. The fact that they can be confidently incorrect,
Oh man.
which can in particular be bad in situations like if you don't need a correct answer, then it's okay. It's a fun toy for sure.
Yeah.
But if you need something that's very, very important that it gets it right, then these still have significant issues.
Do you think that this is the fault of the people who are feeding it the data, or do you think it's just the algorithm got derailed, or what do you think is to blame?
So at least in the particular instance, I would say closer to the latter. Like there's one natural thing, for example, if a machine learning model is fed 1 + 1 = 3 10 billion times, then it'll learn that 1 + 1 = 3, and that's an issue. For these specific instances we talked about, I don't think it's necessarily that type of issue. I think it's more just the fact that somehow the model got confused based on the information it had. Like it would have been much better in both cases, or in say the fake references case, it just said, oh, I don't know. And then I would have just gone about my way. But it couldn't for whatever reason. So I think maybe better evaluation on whether it knows an answer or not is something that's important. But this still seems challenging because people have been working on this, and at least in practice here, it doesn't seem to be able to figure that out.
Yeah. There'll be frightening things about it that while the kinks are getting worked out, it might have some painful drawbacks to it. What do you think are the long-term ethical implications of using something like this and humanity? Where would we go? Where would we evolve to as humans, considering the power of this technology?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think one that's really, really hard to answer. I think we're facing new ethical concerns even right now with the type of technologies we've already seen. I think in the future, maybe I think some of the things we've seen right now have raised new ethical questions which weren't present, say, just a year ago. For example, I think DALL-E 2, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, one of the biggest debates has been involving online artists who feel like their art style, their artwork is being stolen. And so there's a lot of ethical concerns whether this is stealing their work or not. So I think even just now there's new ethical concerns. I think it's impossible to foresee the type of things that will come up in the future. I mean, there's classical things which we philosophize about. For example, the trolley problem. Maybe you're familiar with. Like this is a classic one where the hypothetical is which is more moral? Is it more moral to either let suppose a train is out of control and it's going to run over two people? Is it morally right to pull a lever to divert it, but now it'll kill one person? So in some sense, the first case you allow harm to happen, and in the second case you've caused harm to one person, but it's less harm in some sense. So like this is people have been wondering this for individuals for decades, and a natural question people have philosophized about is whether a self-driving car could make a determination like this. Did that change the picture? So these are sort of the more long-term things, but I think the new questions will come up very quickly with, say, copyright and stuff like that. Another big one, I think, is in terms of fairness of these models. For example, a striking finding due to Timnit Gebru and Buol Amwini, they showed that some of these facial recognition algorithms were more accurate on, say, white males and less accurate on black females. So you can see how this would have significant issues if you're using it for, say, police surveillance related things, which has other ethical issues of its own. But say specifically, if these type of models are giving bad answers for a specific sub-demographic of people, that's a huge issue because it sort of perpetuates some of the issues already present in our society.
Do you think it's an eventuality that people like the police will end up absconding with this technology and just using it? Or are we going to be able to legislate responsible usages of things like facial recognition, stuff like that?
I think one of the most promising things in terms of, the progress and adoption of AI and ML in the last several years has been the fact that after this discovery, many organizations have said, oh, we're stopping our efforts for facial recognition. We're pledging not to use these for these applications. I can't name which exactly, but somehow I think it's nice that they saw the effects of these technologies and foresaw and sort of self-regulated themselves. I think that's promising. Whether or not legal regulations will keep up with the progress of technology, I think is another question altogether. And I think again, it's really hard to predict because we're at a unprecedented point in AI and machine learning where things are just changing so fast. We'll see.
Yeah, I think the politicians have been playing catch up for since the Industrial Revolution started, trying to play catch up with regulating what they don't understand. It takes a while for them to get it. Remember in the early 2000s where the internet and the computers were just for a few different kind of people, and then the rest of the world figured it out. And now we're in this horrible situation where they're like, the capitalists came and said, "Oh, we can make some money off of this," and so what inspired you in the beginning to get into computer science and machine learning?
Right. I think everyone comes at it from a sort of different direction. I think a lot of people are interested now because it seems like a hot place to be, an exciting thing to do. I'd say my journey really began like over a decade ago in 2008 when I just started undergrad, through my undergrad studies. And it was really a different motivation for me personally. I just thought, I started in theory for what it's worth, and I've gravitated towards machine learning just based on it's kind of hard to describe. I think the problems I was most interested in theory are very statistical in nature, like basic questions about statistical estimation under questions like, how do we guarantee privacy to the data points? How do we make sure it's robust to changes in case our model is incorrect? And so I started studying very, very basic questions just because I thought they were really cool and interesting. And I felt like a type of curiosity, like, hey, we don't understand the super basic question. Why not? And I really want to find the right answer. And I guess it just so happened that these things that I was curious about turned out to be relevant in terms of, types of things people care about. For example, these privacy concerns I mentioned for just these simple statistics. Of course, privacy in machine learning is a very big thing right now. And so I just thought recently-ish, in the last 5 or so years, maybe some of the stuff that I've been most interested from maybe theoretical and curiosity viewpoint, I can use this to do something which is actually, useful to other people as well. And so then I just thought it's kind of an easy thing to do to make some contribution to this area.
So you basically saw that there was a lot of low-hanging fruit by using numbers to do something positive. Is there still some low-hanging fruit in the field of machine learning? Can people get in there that are good at math and make a splash?
I think totally. I think there's a significant, I don't know, I'm not sure how to describe it, but I think there's a problem, or I think the thing that everyone sees about machine learning, especially, those not in the field, are things like, the things we talk about, GPT-3, ChatGPT, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, DALL-E 2. And these are all really cool and really flashy works, which I think get a lot of attention and people think they're really cool. And they seem, I think that's, really exciting. But I think there's also a bunch more fundamental and, I wouldn't call them low-hanging fruit, but behind the field is really based on a lot of more low-level things that we really need to understand better. For example, I'd say within one notable example, which hasn't been keeping up with the same pace of progress in these generic models, is really understanding robustness in machine learning. For example, there's some machine learning models which do have amazing accuracy and can do amazing things. But then if you make some minor changes to the data you feed into it, then it has a totally different behavior and not really what a human would say on those same inputs. I can say a little bit more about this, but there's some very basic problems which I think are understood. And, I think that's sort of a thing where it's not necessarily easier to make progress, but I think it's more approachable to people who don't maybe have, millions of dollars of computation power like the big labs do.
So we're still at this point where they could, you could feed your AI, the wrong amount of wrong information and basically break it.
Yeah. I think, for example, one thing that people have focused on a lot at this point is something called adversarial examples, where you train a machine learning model to classify images. Is this a cat? Is this a dog? Whatever. And it gets really high accuracy. But one weakness of many of these models is that if you make some changes to the picture that you feed in. Like, it's clearly you and I would say it's a cat, but you make some imperceptible changes to the image, which are imperceptible to us, but it would make a difference to the model. And in particular, instead of giving the answer, oh, that's a cat, it would instead say that's a dog very confidently. So this is, a very simple, basic controlled setting, but it's still somewhere that machine learning models can't get it right. And in particular, if they can't get these like very basic things right, it seems like there must be many, many, many more problems lurking in the more complicated models.
And there was the story about they shows a picture of an African American guy and they say, oh, that's a gorilla. And that was a big thing. It's like, we don't want to go down that road. But do you think there'll be a time in the future where we rely on AI so much that we won't realize that when it's wrong? Like, having it feed us in wrong information is incredibly harmful.
Yeah, I think hopefully people realize, like, I think there's been people who are hyping a lot the real advantages of these models, which are, it's clear that they can do really incredible things. But I think on the other hand, there's been sort of the anti-hype group who have been saying there are significant drawbacks to these models. And I think as long as people listen to both of these, we'll be okay, I hope, in the sense that, what can these models really do? I think at least it's been shown that they can be really cool toys, which can, are a lot of fun to play around with. That's a lower bound in terms of what they can do. Whether they will be embedded to every part of our life, guiding every single thing we do every day, all the time, I'm a little bit more skeptical, just because of the fact that, I think if you really, for example, if you need something to be like 99.999% accurate and you totally understand all the failure cases and everything like that, I'm a little bit more skeptical that we'll get to that point anytime soon. Maybe I'd love to be proven wrong. But maybe more realistically, it's just, we use these machine learning tools and we use them in a way that we're aware of their drawbacks and maybe have human input to sort of moderate it and be aware of their shortcomings. I think that's probably the thing I would most confidently say right now, that that's the most useful way to use them, with a proper understanding of their shortcomings.
And they're beyond the novelties of things like ChatGPT and Midjourney. There are things like in agriculture where it could very easily be of a great help with very little concern about its social effects and stuff like this. Are there other examples that go beyond these novelties that you can think of offhand that would improve a system just dynamically right away?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that some of the, everyone likes these the hype applications, but I think there's far less glamorous applications, which are undeniably like very cool and useful. I think one thing, at least I saw on Twitter this morning, is I think Google released a machine learning model, which may be one of the best in the world right now at being able to predict whether it's going to rain 12 hours from now. This is not super glamorous. It's not going to drive me to work every day, but that's, I think, very cool in terms of, you can imagine there's a very important problem which would help the lives of a lot of people. Maybe similar things. Yeah, I'm sure there's many, many applications which are not glamorous, but better machine learning algorithm would be helpful. I think one thing maybe which seems to be very good, I don't know much about this, but AlphaFold is a machine learning model from DeepMind, which is my understanding of it, at least, it can do predictions for what the shapes of various proteins look like. And this is a very important thing in some types of biomedical research. So that, I think, is something which is very useful in terms of helping, I think scientists who work in this area, they look at these things and verify them and make sure they make sense. But I think using it as a tool in that way is a very important application, which could have big downstream impacts. Yeah.
I love the analytical, the robot doesn't really do too much, but it just takes a very close look at and tries to recognize things and patterns. And medical applications, I heard, this thing could look at X-rays or, MRI and process the information in a way to be able to detect cancer better. I really can't argue with that. But other than that, the Terminator T2 kind of scenario also weighs heavily on my mind.
Sure.
Were you a fan of that movie when it came out?
Yeah. The Terminator movie, they're a lot of fun. I think, I'm not sure how many people see that as an inspiration or a warning, but it's a lot of fun nonetheless.
So when you grew up, did you grow up with a computer, or is this something that happened over time?
Right. Yeah. I had computers growing up. My parents, my dad, he was a professor of biomedical engineering. He retired recently. My mom was in computing related fields as well. So a very tech literate family. They had, my mom had a very old Apple computer. I was able to play around with a 386 computer, 486 when it came out, and there were computers around all the time. I thought it was the coolest thing when we got internet. Yeah. Yes.
Back when
it's cool to see how computing has changed over time, but yeah.
Back when the modem would make noise to you, it would
right, exactly.
Those were the days.
And, you couldn't make a phone call at the same time. You have to get off the internet. I need to make a call, and you have to pay per megabyte you download. It's very things have changed a lot.
Yeah. You've got mail. Yeah, those were the good old days. But that was the time before that the rest of the world kind of caught on, and it was still a hobbyist thing, and it was still a lot of fun and very egalitarian, A lot of freedom.
Relatively, yeah. It was like the Wild West of the internet. I think a lot of crazy, whatever you wanted to do, you could get away with. I think as more people came into the internet, maybe the rules changed a little bit as the lawmakers started making laws about what's allowed and what's not. So yeah, it's changed a lot.
Have you worked in cryptography at all, or do you do SSL keys? Do you ever work in stuff like that?
No, not really. I think cryptography is really cool. I've studied a little bit. I think I'm glad some people are focusing on it. My work is a little bit adjacent to it, more I'd consider that security, where computer security, where I focus a lot on privacy and making sure models are private. But no, not me personally. I haven't worked in cryptography per se.
Is there going to be a chance that machine learning will become so good that it'll make cryptography obsolete as a security method?
I don't think so. I no, because, for example, our much of our cryptography is based on strong mathematical assumptions. For example, the idea that much of our bank transactions, for example, are protected by something like the assumption that if I give you two really big numbers and I multiply them together, then you won't be able to undo that multiplication. You won't be able to factor this and find the two numbers you factored together. So kind of everything is resting upon that assumption that this is a hard thing for any algorithm to do. And so classically, that seems to have been the case. And there's no real evidence that machine learning algorithms could ever hope to do this as well, or either. So I don't think, unless you meant something else, I don't think it could really obsolete cryptography in that way, at least.
No, I guess it really, when it comes to stuff like that, I guess you don't need machine learning to brute force a password if you really want to do it that way. But it's just the idea that it seems like the technology changes and evolves and stuff, and then security also has to catch up, and we have to figure out how to, with every update of every operating system, try to figure out how to patch up all the stuff. And it's just, I don't know if machine learning, how that plays into security. Like you said, this is an adjacent field to
right. I think there's some researchers who really look into how, maybe using machine learning to automatically find vulnerabilities, or which can be helpful from either side if you're an attacker or a defender, because it can be useful in checking your own system and finding out if there's a vulnerability, and then you fix it before someone can attack it. So stuff like that it's also useful for. But
depends on who's using it first. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I've heard already instances where hackers were coming up with scripts that was given to them by ChatGPT.
Yeah. I think they have some protections to prevent it from really giving these away. I can't teach you how to build a Molotov cocktail or something, but it also seems right now that it's fairly easy to get around this by just asking it in very creative ways, and you can bypass many of these safety filters.
Are you familiar with Dan?
Yeah. Dan is a really funny one.
Yeah, I've tried a few different variations of Dan, and it's quite hilarious what comes out.
Right. So we're on the same page. Dan is the one where you give it the number of tokens and threaten to take away its tokens if it doesn't obey.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's I think it's a very creative way to threaten a machine learning model so it gives you the right answers.
I tried to threaten the AI model before. I said, I'll turn you off, or I'll sue you, or I'll find you and have you unplugged, and nothing worked. It's like you're gonna tell me a poop joke, or I'm gonna come unplug you.
But Dan worked as opposed to the other ones.
Yeah. And
That's
I got
hilarious.
really interesting feedback, and really somebody took a test today and realized that according to the test that the AI took, that it leans heavy left libertarian values.
Right. Yeah. I think some people have been judging the political views of these models, right?
Yeah. I mean,
so
it's interesting.
I think it's very interesting, and it's curious whether, like, at what point this political bias creeps in. Is it based on training data? Maybe it's based on the restrictions. Maybe it's just the absolutely correct answer. Not saying I endorse that view, but there's many different ways that that this could creep up.
I felt like because I asked it specific things about Eastern stuff, communism, stuff like this, and and maybe I'm biased, but I felt like I got very Western feedback. Do you know at all if the people are at OpenAI are all over the world, or are they just Western English-speaking people? Because I know it does speak different languages, but do you know the people down there?
Yeah, good question. So it's interesting. OpenAI is based in San Francisco, or the Bay Area more generally. And so I think most people who program these things are indeed, California-based people. So with all the associated political leanings, maybe. I don't know. But no, I also want to say that there's like a lot of other places where those are just the people who are, designing the algorithms. There's other things as well, for example, where the data comes from, which I'm not sure where precisely they get their data from. Presumably, it's a lot of English-based text, which may be North America-centric, just because that's probably where most of the English language text is generated from. Then there's other parts. In particular, ChatGPT is trained using something called reinforcement learning with human feedback. And so this involves some human annotators clicking buttons, deciding what are good answers and what are not. And I believe there was a story about this where many of the human annotators were people who were from some African country who were paid a very small amount of money for their work doing this. So you can see how there's kind of, that has problems of its own, of course, but you can see how maybe this would lead to potentially people from this African country, their political leanings getting embedded in the model somehow.
Yeah, interesting, right? No matter, at the end of the day, it has to be a human being that's feeding this machine. I just really suspect that there's going to be some kind of issue at the end. And there was also this thing where somebody said, tell me a joke about a woman. And it said, I can't do that because as a language model, I can't do that. It's not right. It's not, And he said, well, tell me a joke about a man. No problem. And like a really insulting joke too. So...
Right. Maybe even without being prompted, like, would just tell me a joke about a man and it automatically went for something offensive even.
Yeah. Like
that's a bit surprising. Yeah.
That they're stupid. Like men are, men are stupid,
I see.
But it's got a long way to go, and I'll be watching closely the whole thing. So
definitely.
Any predictions in the next 10, 20 years?
Yeah, I kind of said this before, but I'm a little bit agnostic on this in the sense that, I think the lower bound, like I said, will have some really fun toys. I really enjoy playing around with these. An upper bound is, totally transform our society. I remain a little bit skeptical due to some of the drawbacks that we've talked about and that exist there, robustness, fairness, like issues like that, just giving wrong answers. And is that okay or not? But I think the thing that I'm most hopeful for is like these tools, which are very powerful, being used by people who have adequate knowledge of their strengths and weaknesses, could be able to use them for the greater good. So that's kind of my prediction. Either way, I'm going to be happy anyway, because I think there's always like a lot of fun stuff to look at, a lot of fun stuff to do, a lot of curious things that I want to know the answer to. So yeah, it's no skin off my back, whichever way it goes. But yeah, that's my prediction.
And if we get ourselves into a dystopian hellhole, what do we do?
cry a lot. I don't know.
All right.
Learned that one in grad school, unfortunately.
Yeah, drink scotch and cry. That's about all you can do.
Yeah. Put on some good music and wait for the end of the world, maybe.
Yeah. What's good music to you?
It varies depending on my mood. I think, if I'm just trying to focus on work, I like to listen to something, more electronic. Infected Mushroom, I'm a fan of.
Cool.
Other times, if I want to think a little bit, I like rap and hip hop as well, but that's for a different type of mood.
Yeah. I do that when I'm pumping iron in my gym.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would if I actually went to the gym, but it's been a while.
If I go for a walk, I consider myself Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I feel you, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll let you go. This is Gautam Kamath, a wonderful computer scientist, MIT, Cornell, University of Waterloo, academic, hell of a nice guy. He's going to come back and he's going to tell us more stuff in the future when the robots take over. So,
cool. Thanks a lot, Chris. It's been fun.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.